A grand New Egypt king, Tut and the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom, 1540 to 1070 BCE. Beginning with the 18th dynasty, Egypt experienced a period of unprecedented success in international affairs. There was a succession of extraordinary and able kings and queens who laid the foundations of a strong Egypt. The New Kingdom was an era of revival and change. It saw the reign of one of Egypt's great pharaohs, Hatshepsut, a woman. It also witnessed a revolution in religion under the pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten and destroyed the temples of the old Egyptian gods, instituting a new monotheistic religion. The New Kingdom saw the brief reign of the boy king Tutankhamun, made famous thousands of years later by the rediscovery of his tomb in 1922. And finally, it saw the great building projects of Ramesses II. One of the most intriguing figures of the New Kingdom was the pharaoh Amenhotep IV, who renamed himself Akhenaten. During his reign in the 14th century BCE, Akhenaten deposed the existing polytheistic religious orders and established a new monotheistic order, that of the sun god Aten. The heretic king abandoned the old temples and named a new capital, Akhetaten, now known as Tel el Amarna. He was revolutionary not only in his religious beliefs, but in his artistic tastes as well. With the new religious order came also a new style and ideal of beauty unseen in Egyptian art prior to this point. This new style of art is referred to as the Amarna style. Akhenaten. Creating radical change within a culture can stir up feelings of alarm. The people of Egypt felt this concern when the pharaoh Akhenaten converted the polytheistic practices of the culture to monotheism, worshipping one god, Aten. Historians have analyzed the reasoning behind Akhenaten's shift in religion and have come up with a theory based on his upbringing. As a young child, Akhenaten was left behind when the family attended ceremonies in the capital city of Thebes. Because of this, he felt no connection to the religious traditions or cultural practices of the people of Egypt. Once he became pharaoh, he had the power to reject the society that he was never part of and create his own. After he became pharaoh, Akhenaten and his family traveled north from Thebes. During that journey, it is said that he had a vision in which the god Aten showed him the location where the new capital would be. This uninhabited land had a valley that allowed for the setting sun to be perfectly framed in the sky. With this sign from Aten, Akhenaten knew this was the right location for his new capital. Akhenaten brought his followers and people to this new area to construct a capital where worship would focus on Aten alone. However, many people questioned their place in this new society. The people were unsure how to abruptly change their belief system and did not understand what position old priests would now hold. This resulted in confusion and doubt for the Egyptian culture. Akhenaten and the Amarna period. Each ruling dynasty within the vast history of Egypt is given a name that represents those who ruled. The period of the rule of Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti is referred to as the Amarna period. Taking control of Egypt in approximately 1353 BC, Akhenaten stepped in after his father Amenhotep III died. Under Amenhotep III, there had been a long period of prosperity and diplomacy, which was a drastic change from the years of wars and fighting that had occurred previously. Akhenaten was raised in a time of pageants, celebrations, luxury, and economic growth. When Akhenaten was crowned pharaoh, he was referred to as Amenhotep IV. The name Amenhotep means Amun is content, testifying to the calm of the land. However, within 2 years after Amenhotep IV took over Egypt, an obvious shift in cultural practices took hold. The new pharaoh began paying homage to the god that he deemed to be the only god, Aten, the divine sun disk. It was at this time that Amenhotep IV officially changed his name to Akhenaten. Soon, temples devoted to Aten were constructed, and Akhenaten even relocated the capital city. He ordered the new capital city Akhenaten to be constructed in Middle Egypt. This site would be clean of any corruption from the cults of worship that came before. For the Egyptian people, this change in religious culture was severe and drastic. Gone were the beliefs in many gods that took form as combinations of animals and humans. Specific gods related to towns were no longer approved for worship. The sun disk Aten, being necessary for life and an obvious force in the deserts of Egypt, went from being a major deity to the sole deity. Akhenaten claimed that he and his entire family were blessed by the power of this god. The change in religious beliefs manifested itself in the art of the time period as well. Akhenaten now required that the artwork illustrate his family in more realistic and natural ways, participating in daily activities. More elongated and individualized facial features, weight gain in the stomach, and less than ideal body shapes were normal representations of the pharaoh. Scenes of daily life, such as Akhenaten and Nefertiti playing with their daughters, were portrayed. Never in the catalog of Egyptian art had a ruling pharaoh allowed himself to be portrayed in such common ways. The rulers were perfect in body and stately in their activities. Akhenaten, instead, represented himself as an individual with a personality and unique appearance. However, in many of the illustrations of Akhenaten and his family, the obvious sun disk with long-reaching rays was placed in the scene to illustrate the connection between Akhenaten and the god Aten. After 17 years of rule, Akhenaten died. There is some controversy over who took control of Egypt at that time, but eventually, his son Tutankhamun took over. There were many years where Tutankhamun and his advisors worked to change the culture back to the traditions of the past. Religious culture eventually reverted back to the polytheism of the past. So driven were the cultural leaders to refocus society that images of Akhenaten were destroyed and the history of his rule buried. One of the most well-known pieces of Egyptian art comes from the New Kingdom period. It is the famous bust of Queen Nefertiti, wife of Akhenaten. She stands as the supreme example of female beauty, representing a timeless grace and poise that is still admired today. During the New Kingdom, the pharaohs built vast temple complexes carved out of the stone cliffs surrounding the Nile River. The Valley of the Kings is where most of these tombs are located. Nearby, you can find the funerary temples where they were worshipped and where a variety of religious ceremonies took place. Valley of the Kings. From 1500 to 1000 BC, Egyptians practiced a custom of burying their rulers in one specific location. What we now know as the Valley of the Kings was the burial place for those pharaohs. Located on the west bank of the Nile River, this necropolis, or City of the Dead, provided a final resting place for much of Egypt's royalty. This particular region was utilized for burial because of the convenient limestone present in the hillsides. The limestone was easy to cut and allowed for the creation of smooth walls. In addition, this area was close to the Nile River. This allowed for convenient access to the burial area from the river itself, which made the transport of the bodies easier. The steep cliffs of the hills were also ideal for protection. In the two valleys, east and west, archaeologists have found approximately 65 tombs and an additional 20 burial pits that were unfinished. The actual tombs were each assigned a number. The first 22 were numbered in order from north to south. From there, they were numbered in order of discovery. The most famous and recent of the discoveries was tomb number 62, Tutankhamun's tomb. The selection of the site also adhered to the important customs of the time. The Nile River served a symbolic purpose in Egyptian beliefs of the afterlife. It was the transportation road to the afterlife. In addition, the necropolis was on the west bank of the river, the same side as the setting sun. This marked the end of life on this earth for the pharaoh. The Valley of the Kings has been a focus for tourists and researchers alike. With so many individuals wanting to see the site firsthand, many conservation steps have been put in place. The traditional trappings of tourist sites, such as restaurants and souvenir kiosks, were removed. Plexiglass was installed to protect against people touching the artifacts and decorations. Handrails, cement paths, and steps have also been installed to gain better crowd control. The biggest threat to the Valley of the Kings has been flooding. Flooding has destroyed many pieces and washed debris into many others. Flood deflection walls and shelters have been placed by many of the tomb entrances. It is here in the Valley of the Kings that the best known of all the tombs was located, that of King Tutankhamun. Remarkably, the tomb was found intact. It had been buried in the sand and was never discovered by the tomb robbers who raided the Valley of the Kings for centuries. Within this tomb were some of the greatest treasures of the ancient world. One of the greatest builders of the New Kingdom was the pharaoh Ramesses II, who ruled Egypt roughly 50 years after Tutankhamun. He's not only known for his great building projects and propaganda, but for signing the first recorded peace treaty in history. After the reign of Ramesses III, 1194 to 1163 BCE, Egypt began to suffer economic problems and a breakdown in the fabric of society. The last vestiges of the living culture ceased to exist in 391 CE, when the Byzantine Emperor Theodosius I closed all pagan temples throughout the Roman Empire. Egyptian culture declined and disappeared nearly 2,000 years ago. It was not until Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798 that the wonderful artifacts of the Egyptians were seen in Europe, and their ancient culture began to awaken from its long slumber.